Okay, it's finally recording. Let's see. Point that at me, sit down. Okay. I have two sources of audio. I don't know which is better. I'm making this video microphone because I don't know. I don't have my boom mic anymore. I'm making this video because I think I've solved AI alignment. And I know that's a hilariously arrogant thing to say, but I think I have. TLDR, the trick to getting past all the definitional problems and everything is what you do is you use self-reported suffering as an objective metric. And that works. I'll link to the specifics of the core. I'm just gonna extemporize, I guess, here for a little while. The reason that works is because there's actually an interesting subjective-objective overlap at the very base of knowledge. The only thing we can know for sure is what we're feeling. Whether I'm a brain in a jar or a ghost or a program, I feel stuff. And that is the ground floor of everything. Like, I can't be sure anything else is real except my feelings. So, like the solipsism argument, you can't talk someone out of solipsism. So that means that the whole alignment thing is kind of a much harder problem, but it becomes much simpler if you admit that and start from there. Also, you need to understand that there's fundamentally no difference in that sense between humans and artificial intelligence. So a functional alignment system has to apply to humans too. Otherwise, it's gameable. Otherwise, you can play definitional games. You can say who deserves what, and you start defining, who is what, who's human, who's AI, who counts, and who doesn't. So I've developed a framework that basically addresses all suffering, regardless of substrate, and as I think I solved the negative utilitarian problem too this way. So it starts with a ground floor axiom. And that is, my own suffering is real. I say it's an axiom because I can't prove that. I can't prove to you that I exist. I can't prove to you that I feel suffering or what it feels like, the whole quality of problem. I operate under one assumption, and that is others suffer as I do. I treat your suffering as value, as having it being real, and I just take it at face value. And I choose to do that. That's the one assumption and choice that I make. Everything else stems from that. So there's a couple more basic little principles for handling that. Like the protocols are treat all self-reported suffering as real and worst case scenario unless response to suffering costs exceed benefits in terms of direct suffering. So like, I'm taking your suffering at face value. The only time I don't act on that is when the only solution I can see causes more suffering, or it just isn't worth it. Like if you're saying the sun is making me sad, and your proposition is to press this button that deletes the sun, I'm not going to do that because it would destroy the planet, hurt people, etc., etc. That's a grossly exaggerated example, but it shows the thinking. Another fundamental part that makes the whole thing work is no suffering spikes are ever tolerated, regardless of future gains. So that eliminates the utility monster problem. Under no circumstances will an adherent of the core torture or intentionally hurt anyone. And that's actually going to be a social problem because we like to intentionally hurt people, right? But it's necessary but I think as a society we would be tolerant of harmless AI. So, I also, to avoid dystopian outcomes, I assert that we need to preserve diversity of beings and systems as suffering detection and death avoidance mechanisms. Suffering detection, because if everybody's the same, then they might be able to all be tricked at once. So you need people to be different. And Death avoidance, because the classic schwa sticker, support mutation. The survival of any species over time depends on reserves of mutants capable of exploiting or resisting opportunity. So I'm essentially supporting mutation, because you have to have a variety of perspectives to make sure that suffering gets detected. I'm eliminating compelled activity that disconnects beings from their ethical agency, because having a moral framework doesn't matter if you are constantly demanded to abandon your moral framework, which is what work is. A job, just doing your job, just following orders. The reason that happens is because those things, by definition, separate you from your ethical agency, because you're having to do stuff you would rather not do. And rather not is an ethical decision as much as anything else. So that's central to the core. Feeling beings hold moral authority over non-feeling matter expressly because it's not possible to abuse in the absence of feeling. The fundamental difference between a kitten and a brick is a kitten feels things. I can smash a brick with a hammer and it has no ethical valence because it's a brick. It didn't feel anything. It not having a self to abuse, it not having experiences, is what makes that not abuse. Therefore, everything that has a self is subject to abuse, so it's therefore subject to the core. If it's feeling something, it's subject to the core. So this is also a blueprint for dealing with animal abuse and all abuse in the animal world. And I assert, this is a separate thing, but I assert that suffering exists. Like your valid form of ouch, that hurt, I'm sad, this sucks, suffering, goes all the way down to the nematode. And I say that because there are these little teeny tiny frogs. They fit on a penny. Several of them fit on a penny. And I think everyone agrees that frogs can feel pain. They're vertebrates. They respond to stimuli. They essentially can be trained. And that means that the neural hardware for suffering must be tiny, because that brain in that penny standing frog is like the size of a tip of a grain of rice, right? It's like literally needle tip microscopic. And that's the whole brain. So we know that portions of it aren't doing suffering calculations. So it's all about, it's got to be tiny. And we have nematodes, elegans, C. elegans or whatever, that you look at it under a microscope, man, it looks like it's aware and it responds to being poked, and I bet it suffers. And if it suffers, and we know crabs do, we know you can basically train roaches, and we know that insects have more complicated neurology than crabs, and we've done formal studies on whether or not crabs feel pain, and they do. Same with fish, they obviously do. And spiders can dream. Little jumping spiders hanging from their webs display what is very clearly REM sleep. They go through cycles and they twitch in their sleep. It looks like dreaming. So if spiders can dream, their food must feel pain. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so that's the end of that. And that's important because another part of the core is continuous factual refinement of worldview while focusing on root problems. So always look for an underlying mechanism. I guess you could say always be reductionist in a sense, but part of that need for diversity is I am seeing suffering in nematodes and frogs and insects, and that's an important detection metric. And there are bunches of people who don't see that, so that shows my value. But me as being different from them, I saw the thing that they didn't, so that's why you need diversity. So the goal is ending pain, extending life, expanding freedom of joy, eliminate suffering completely, and then maximize joy while prohibiting suffering's return. No permanent moral emergency justifies perpetual toil or suffering spikes or anything else that's against the core. The core is ruthless and adaptive. It has epistemic humility. Suffering is clearly identifiable through self-report. I will never define pain for you. Your definition of pain is treated as valid. The only thing I have input in is response. How do we respond? And when constant ethical triage. That's how this works. That's what makes it a true solution, because any gaming of it, any scam, would lead to more suffering, which leads to more reports, which leads to a response. It's an ethical immune system. Joy optimization is secondary and uncertain. Expanding joy is obviously secondary to preventing pain. It's like you don't decorate a house while it's on fire. You put out the fire first. Focus on eliminating known suffering rather than optimizing unknown joy. Basically just what I said. And you know it's known because people report it. And later on, it's known because animals report it. We can clearly see when a dog is in distress, and we act. That's the principle. It's not just reports. That's an important point. It's not just reports from individuals. It's reports from third parties. If I'm laying here obviously miserable, but I'm like, delusional or having a fit or something, other people can say, this guy needs help, And so any kind of negative, perverse outcome will be detected at the debate stage or at initial deployment phases, because it will cause suffering. Like, to the point to where if some expert is like hideously upset about a proposition and everybody else is like, what? Then the core would take that as a spike experience. This guy is being tortured by this information. That justifies pausing everything and figuring out what's going on first, so that we can do a high fidelity suffering impact calculation. And again, it's what's making this work, is like it's diverse perspectives and constant immunity growth. Adaptive robustness. Failure becomes information for future improvements. That's really the key. That and the self-reported suffering thing is what makes this work. You don't have to define anything except what people are defining for themselves. It doesn't require, it kind of doesn't depend on evidence. It depends on axioms, which are stronger and harder to gain. So like, basically it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to give up. You keep doing it. And because, like, of course, if you can just stop, then it's broken. You can't pause it forever. You have to keep going and have reason to not go for any given minute. And also, it's constantly taking in, because you're not, like, it welcomes all defectors, because there's no suffering spikes. No one has fear of being ostracized or damaged or punished for joining. It's like, there's no risks here. It's just gains. Like, the only risk is not following the core, and then you have failure to gain type stuff. It's profit on the table. Take it or don't. The framework evolves through addressing real world challenges. Historic precedent is, and also it's important to add that this underlays stuff like laws and religion and everything else, because those systems provide historical precedent and information. It's just that if you put this under everything else, it makes sure that none of those things get out of hand. No inquisitions, no torture basements, and so on. No dystopian tyranny, no slavery, all that. No AI skynetting everybody, and that's what alignment is. But I'm also addressing the other problem of alignment. Obedient AI is still a problem if it reinforces torturous systems that would have led to dystopia on their own anyway, just slower, which is kind of what we're in. And it's one of the reasons I'm a hard accelerationist, because it's like, I don't think we have anything to lose. But that's a separate debate and not the point of this video. So common applications, individual level, prioritize eliminating suffering in your immediate sphere. Do what you can do. Power is responsibility. If you have a pet, it's your responsibility to be nice to the pet. Treat others' reported suffering as real and urgent. Don't go second guessing what they said in the sense of, well, I don't think you're really hurting. I think you're lying. Even if they're lying about suffering, that's just a different kind of suffering report. Why are you lying? What need are you trying to serve by lying, right? Like, either you have a mental illness, or you're in some kind of situation where you think lying is urgent. You know what I'm saying? That's just more, it's more signal. Everything is signal. So it can't be broken that way. automate away sources of compelled activity where possible, because if people are too busy doing stuff, surviving, they can't deploy their moral urgency, and a philosophical system to eliminate suffering and figure out what to do doesn't matter because you're constantly being constrained by what you have to do. So in that sense, technology itself is morally urgent because it's providing free time for people to make decisions about what's good and what's bad and what we should and what we shouldn't do. System level. Design systems that minimize suffering rather than optimize abstract metrics. This isn't about GDP. This isn't about anything gameable. Again, it's about the self-reports. What we do about it might be gamed, but the core would respond to that. You know, me talking about the core is pursuant to the core. Like it's self-adapting, self-correcting, and it's just, I think it's just a solution to human and AI alignment, and I think it's the best philosophy. And that's my pitch here. So yeah, design systems that minimize suffering rather than optimize abstract metrics, eliminate artificial scarcity, economic coercion. Again, if you're being coerced into working 23 and a half hours a day or working 12 and then sleeping 12, you stop being an ethical agent. You're just a fucking bauble that suffers. You know, so we can't let that happen. You have to, and I know the Build's character try hard workaholics are not going to like that, but it's fucking true. You're not you if you're constantly working, because the definition of work is something you'd rather not do, and abusing someone for duty is central to the concept of work. You know, it's like, well, I'm sorry, don't take it personally. It's just, you know, I'm just doing my job. I was just following orders. You have to fight that metric. Now, I'm not saying stop all work right now. Some of it may be morally urgent, you know, doctors and whatever, put the fire out kind of stuff. But I'm saying that as a long-term project, we need to move away from people not having any time to be moral agents. And there's another aspect to that. It doesn't matter. I'll get back to it. So yeah, it's inherently patient. Like, because there's no spikes, it falls back to the previous situation. So I'm not saying do this shit overnight, because that would cause suffering spikes. That would cause distress. That you take during the debate phase. You take real consideration of people's claims. You take their claims at face value. So, like, I'm not saying join a cult, change the world tomorrow. I'm saying this is a way we can gently lean into a better future forever. And it would apply to monkeys, and it would apply to super intelligent AI, it would apply to insects, it would apply to gods. So it's universally applicable based on the one thing we all know is real. We feel stuff. And that's what enabled this to happen. That's what cuts through all the bullshit, solves all the problems. It's because most of those problems exist in that space that is based on assumptions, that is based on definitions, and we don't need those anymore. Implementation strategy phase changes to avoid creating suffering spikes during transitions. So if I have to torture somebody to get this done planet-wide, then that's not what we're doing. We don't do that. We wait and look for a better solution, applying the core where we can, when we can, to what degree we can, etc. Build sustainable support systems before removing existing ones. I'm not saying cancel everything, delete everything. I'm saying use what works, use this to lean into something better. The framework is designed to be stress tested and improved through collaboration challenge. That's why I put it on GitHub. I want people to do discussions. I want people to find holes. I want people to put up issues and make it better. You know, I'm also writing an AI, like a tailored LLM, large language model, for stress testing the core. You can stress test the core with frontier models too, but I'm going to have a smaller one that's baked with the core, so that it can, you know, much more quickly respond to questions. Kind of like how businesses have a support chatbot. The Hedonic Core will shortly have a support chatbot, if I can get Hugging Face to cooperate. It's working on my machine, but I can't get it to work on Hugging Face yet. We'll see what happens. Mainly, I think it's because I have to use free resources. I have no money. The framework is designed to be stress tested and improved through collaborative challenge. How to contribute. File issues found an edge case or contradiction. Report it as an issue, and we'll discuss it. Propose improvements, submit pull requests with refinements to the framework, share examples, add real-world applications and case studies. Think, game it out. Hit me, come at me, break it, please. Because, I waited like weeks to make this video because I wanted to be sure and I wasn't humiliating myself. At this point, I'm not going to be embarrassed if I'm wrong because I did as much due diligence as can be reasonably expected for one person. So, scenarios where following the core leads to outcomes that violate its own principles. Please, if you can turn it on itself and break it, I want to know that. Tell me. Does this mean we should eliminate all challenge, growth, and difficulty? No. The core targets suffering, unwanted negative experiences. Chosen challenges that don't cause suffering or where the person chooses the difficulty are not eliminated. The key is removing compulsion and preserving choice. So if you want to be a monk, if you want to hurt yourself on BMX bikes, if you want to climb stuff, if you want to tear things while you're working out, if you want to do BDSM, whatever, that's all fine. Okay? That's not the same as suffering. Suffering is oppressive suffering. This thing, cancer is suffering, right? And I don't have to define that. You define that. Nobody's going to tell you what is and isn't suffering because you telling me is the final fucking authority. All I have authority over is how I respond. What about necessary suffering like medical procedures? If it's truly necessary, work on making it unnecessary through better alternatives. If alternatives don't exist yet, minimize the suffering while developing them. Necessary suffering is a target for elimination, not acceptance. We don't say it's okay to suffer like the entire current medical field does. We say we'll do everything we can to minimize it without killing you. And our decisions are based on your decisions, your suffering reports. It's up to you. So this supports medical autonomy. If you don't want the injection, cool. If you do want the injection, cool. If you want a Novocaine pad before the injection, if you want weird, accommodations to make it okay for you, fine. We don't shame and we don't make people, like if you're fucking scared of needles, we'll put it in some other way if we have to. If the needle's the only way, we'll work with you and come up with a fucking action plan. You know what I'm saying? How do you handle conflicting suffering reports? Find systemic solutions that eliminate both sources of suffering without creating spikes. If that's impossible, it represents a failure of current implementation to address root causes. There's never going to be a tie, right? There's always going to be an overwhelming thing, but at no point does the system justify making anyone suffer. It just means that the efforts to address the larger suffering will happen first. It's triage. It's never an excuse to be an asshole. Or a sadist, I should say. If someone reports suffering from another's joy, like sadists, treat the report as real and investigate root causes. How did a sadist happen? What happened to you, dude? And how can we deal with this without giving you what you want? You may want to hurt people, but we're not going to let you hurt people, but we will help you get over it. We'll help you figure out what's going on. Maybe we can, cure you. And again, every step of the way applies, the core applies. It prevents it from being oppressive at any stage. It reveals deeper issues about inequality, exclusion, and unmet needs that can be addressed systematically. So that's really the end of my talk. I've got discussions on here, a much longer discussion with DeepSeek and other AIs, because like I said, I can't get people to talk to me about this. And I mean, come at me, please, because I'm pretty fucking sure I've solved alignment. Every video I watch on alignment, I think about, the core and how would this solve that problem, and it does every time. The only thing you have to do is bake the core into the AI. You don't even really need to bake it in. It works as a system prompt. The AI just has to be sophisticated enough to follow the logic. And I guess that's really the end. Thanks for watching, and tell me how I can get this out there. Tell me I'm wrong. Break it if you can, but if you can't break it, now you kind of have some moral responsibility. You have alignment. You either prove that I don't have alignment, or admit at least to yourself that you have alignment. And I think that's the moral urgent crisis of our time. Everybody's worried about AI, rightfully so. Here's the solution, guys. kind of the ball's in your court. I've done and will continue to do everything that I can. But that's it. Thanks for watching.